I am so excited to have Durenda Wilson joining me today. Durenda is one of those ladies that as soon as I met her, I knew that we had just such a kinship, so much in common because even as we were just praying before we started, we sought to raise our children very, very similarly as we were seeking to raise them God's way. So I am thrilled for you to hear from her today. Durenda, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am thrilled. And, you were just in Pigeon Forge a few weeks ago, and I heard such great things coming out of your sessions. People were really encouraged and challenged. And so I'm just so glad that we got to do that event together. And I know that you've been talking a lot about boys. You have a new book about boys, and we're going to get there. But I want you to tell everybody a little bit of your story and how God shaped your family so that they understand where you're coming from as we start talking about raising boys.
Sure. Yes. So I have been married to my husband for 34 years, and we always joke that he wanted 2 kids and I wanted 10, and we compromised at 8. So we got
you
8
you
kids.
almost won that one.
Right. I think so. He did far more compromising than me, but now he's just so thankful that we had all the kids we did, and we just love them. But 5 of them were boys. So that definitely changes sort of like the dynamics in your house. If you weigh heavy on boys or heavy on girls, I feel like it functions accordingly a little more. And so there was a lot that I learned over the years about raising boys, and had a good experience raising our boys, not that I didn't have frustrating times, and I share those in my book. I'm very open about that, but being able to work through that with them, and then to be on the other side of it where they are adults. And I always laugh because I always describe it this way, that our kids care about what we think, but not more than they should. And I think that's especially true for our boys. They're very independent and all of that, problem solvers, but boy, they will be right there for you if you need them. And also they'll come to us for counsel too. And so I felt like it was an adventure, and it was a whole lot of fun. I loved having a lot of boys. And so there was always something exciting going on all the time. And so that's sort of what led me to writing the book, is I have ended up with a lot of moms asking about boys. And specifically when I share, it seems like there's a lot of interaction surrounding that. And I think there are reasons for that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did you grow up with boys?
I had one brother and one sister, and that was it. But my brother was only 17 months younger than me.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, I think this was probably a God thing. I observed my mom and how she handled him a lot. And she knew what she was doing. She had 6 brothers. And so she was really good with him. And then I had a junior high teacher who was excellent with the boys in the middle school age. And I watched him too and learned a lot from him. And I share some of those things in my book, but yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I had, my oldest 2 were boys, and I grew up with just a sister. So I had friends that were boys, but I had no experience whatsoever. And I suspect that one of the reasons why people have such a lot of, or have so many questions about raising boys is, first of all, we're girls, so we don't think anything like them. And secondly, if we didn't grow up like you did, where you were actually watching others do it, it's so different. So I'm can definitely see how this message resonates and how it fits so many needs. Even I would let my mom read it because she struggled as I was raising my boys, like the wildness, the just out there dangerous side of a guy. She was like freaking out half the time. And I'm like, they'll be fine. But I think this would be great for grandmas too, because I think that just reminding yourselves of these things, it just has so much value to it for us ladies, especially that are investing in these guys that we don't fully understand them.
Right. Exactly. And I just realized over the years, I don't have to be able to relate to how they are, but I do need to understand some of the reasons they do what they do, because, well, especially in the current cultural climate, being a boy is like a bad thing. Being male is bad. Being masculine is bad. And so we've been kind of told this in many different ways for many years. And so here we are as moms trying to raise our boys to men, and yet we're struggling with what does that look like, and how much should I let them do, and how many boundaries should I put on them? How do I encourage them? Because quite frankly, a lot of the things they do can, like you said, be very terrifying to us, because we can't relate, to why would you want to do that? Why would you want to test the laws of gravity and physics in this way, and yet they have a strong need to do that. And it's so much a part of their development, and so much a part of who they are. And this energy that they have, it is a feature. It's not a bug. And I think that's where we're getting a completely opposite message from the culture. And out of our 12 grandkids, 7 of them are boys. And so and some of them live right here on the property with us. So I have constant contact and reminder of boys and how they do things in their development and all of that. And it's just so much fun to be able to encourage them in the right way,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I found that God grew me a lot just as I was trying. I didn't want to do anything that would hold them back from becoming the men that God called them, created them to be. And yet there was a lot that made me uncomfortable. And so I learned so much about trusting God and his wisdom and his plan for them, just by really giving them the opportunities to express their manliness at various, in various ways through the years.
Yeah. And so some of the things that end up happening is they initially, they often try to do that in a way that God didn't intend. So they're trying to, kind of tell mom what to do and take the leadership role there, and not understanding, but needing to understand that they're in training right now. And that this idea that they want to lead and they have this desire to be in charge is a God-given thing, but it has to be yielded to the Lord. And what that looks like is yielded to mom and dad. And so, and then eventually, and I would tell our boys this, eventually you're going to have your own wife and your own children to lead and protect and all of that. And I said, but I'm not that wife. And these are not your children, and so really trying to make sure that they knew that I knew that what they wanted to do was a good thing and it was a God-given thing, but it had to be yielded to the Lord first. And I think that's so important. But if we can give them as many leadership, decision-making opportunities as possible, this does not mean they run the show. For sure. They definitely need to have boundaries. That's super important. And I talk about that in the book, how important that is and why it's important. But if we can give them as many opportunities as possible along the way to make decisions, we're training them toward that. It starts out in small ways and then it builds from there. And by the time they're in their teen years, hopefully they're making a lot of their own decisions on their own, and they're making good decisions because we've been discipling them towards wisdom, because we know no child is born wise. We're all born foolish, and we have to learn wisdom. And so I think the trick for moms, especially homeschooling moms who are with their boys all day long, is to know, how do I direct that energy? How do I recognize what is a God-given thing, that this God-given nature, and maybe how it's being how they're exercising that, maybe in a way that shouldn't be. And I can say, no, not this way, but this way. I like to give the example of, say you've got 3 siblings, two boys and a girl, and one of the boys is picking a little bit on the girl, and then the other one just hauls off and hits him, Well, his motivation was good. He wanted to protect his sister, and we want them to do that. We want them to learn to protect the weaker, people, protect women, but also protect people who are helpless and need their help. But maybe that's not the way to do it.
Right. And that's where we're able to actually shepherd them and help them take those reactions that are innate. That's a good thing, but they also need the self-control and the character that kind of rounds it out and makes them a man after God's own heart, which is what we're all shooting for.
Yes, absolutely.
So your book, I love the title, Raising Boys to Men, a simple, mercifully short book on raising and homeschooling boys. And you give so much great information in here, but I love the fact that you give an acronym that makes it easier for moms to remember what their boys need. Can you give us a little rundown of that? Because I
Sure.
thought it was so, so helpful.
Well, I chose something that should be easy for moms to remember, moms of boys specifically. The acronym is BURP. So B is for boundaries, U is for use few words,
Mm-hmm.
R is for respect and responsibility, and P is for prayer. So I feel like these are sort of pillars that we need to be keeping in the forefront of our mind as we're raising our boys. And I expound on all four of those in the book. But I found that these things, that was a pretty good total description of kind
Yeah.
of what our boys need. And a lot of the things that come up fall under these categories.
Oh,
And so, yeah.
absolutely. And it's positioned in a way that moms of boys will fully understand with the burp there.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Trying to keep things easy, moms.
Exactly, exactly. Well, you talk, I want to just kind of let you expand a little bit on a few of these. But you talk about boundaries and you alluded to it a minute ago, but why why are boundaries so important for our guys?
Well, I think first of all, as believers, we have an understanding or should have an understanding that we're all born sinful.
Mm.
So when our boys are pressing those limits and crossing over the line, that's a point at which they're in rebellion, disobedience, and they need to learn where that line is and learn to respect it. And that's our job as parents to train our kids in that way. But boys, especially, just for some reason, it seems like they need to know all the time that the boundary is the same, and they will
Yeah.
be checking regularly. A lot of times, several times a day, to make sure that the boundaries you set are the same. This makes them feel secure, and it makes them feel they can go about the business of learning and doing the things that they need to do for their development and growth, as long as they know that the boundaries are the same all the time. And so I have found with boys, especially, some of the best ways for me to do that are to give physical
Mm-hmm.
um, consequences, running, you know, doing things, chopping wood, moving rocks, digging holes, doing burpees, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever we have to do when they've crossed over that line. But the thing about boys is there's usually three questions that are going through their minds all the time. All the time. And if those questions aren't being answered, often they will be pushing that boundary to find out what the answer is. And so those three questions are who's in charge,
Mm-hmm.
and who's on my team, and what are we doing, or what is our mission? And so much of what we do as moms is making sure those questions are being answered throughout the day. And yes, mom and dad are in charge, but also mom and dad are on your team.
Yeah.
And here's your mission, whatever that is, And so some of the ways that we did that with our boys was we always had regular chore time. They were shouldered with responsibilities from a really
Yeah.
early age appropriate ones. And then we built from there, but just encouraging ownership of everything they were doing. But in terms of the boundaries, there's just something innate in a boy that he wants to press that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to just make sure that we are consistent. We're going to have times when we're not. It's going to happen, but I think don't give up. Always go back to consistency,
Yeah.
just for the sake of your son.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about the three questions, it actually reminded me, I had a conversation with my boys after they graduated from high school, and just to get some insight from them. I actually did a video for 365 with them talking to me, which is so helpful because I learned so much. But one of the things that they said that was kind of earth shattering to me, I wish I had realized it sooner, was to them, if they didn't see the point in it, if it didn't seem to be a mission critical task, they didn't know why it's like, don't do that. Let's get to the point. Let's do what we got to do. And I think that element of it, that kind of an insight for us moms, because we don't think that way necessarily, is really helpful, because everything that I was having them do was essentially mission critical. That was going towards an end, but I could have helped them connect those dots a little bit better if I had realized that's the way they were thinking.
That's exactly right. So even taking out the garbage and organizing the recycling. Okay, so let's talk about what the mission is. The mission is to take care of our home.
Mm-hmm.
We're stewards of our homes. And this is something that we try to teach our kids from day one. When we take care of what God has given us, which he has commanded us to do in Genesis, he said to take dominion over the earth. Our job is to just bring order to chaos. Because of sin, everything tends towards chaos. And so our job as believers is to continue to bring order to chaos, just like Jesus brings order to chaos in our hearts and in our lives. And so we're continuing his work, and in the simplest things. So it gives meaning to things like taking out the garbage. And then to talk about the practical end. What if nobody ever took out the garbage? What would happen? You know, there's this old book called Sarah, Sylvia, Cynthia Stout Would Not Take the Garbage Out. And it goes on to this, tells the consequences about how this garbage built up. And, you know, so at the end of the day, all of our work as believers is meaningful. And I think that's so important. That's such a wonderful thing to be able to bring across as believers to our boys in giving them a mission. Like, this isn't just about taking out the garbage. This is about caring for each other. If we left the garbage in the house, we'd have all kinds of rodents, rats, bugs. We'd get sick. I mean, there's just so much we can tell them. Like, what if we didn't do this? What would happen? So we really need you to do this. And all of a sudden it just changes their perspective on why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
So yeah, I love that point. That's really good.
Well, and it also, we have the opportunity to help lay a foundation now for the fact that they are a whole being. So that when they get older and they have a career and they have a family and they have all of these different segments of their life, which so many people really see as siloed, you know, these little different segments.
Right.
No, as a believer, especially, they are one. You are offering your life as a living sacrifice. All these elements, they all work together towards the common mission that you have been given. And we're able in little ways all the way along to give them a foundation to build that on.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And that's what I love about being a Christian parent and having God's word as our anchor, is it brings meaning to everything. And it's truth. Like, it's actual real meaning. We're not pretending this. We're not making this up. We're not willing something into being. The God of the universe has willed this into being.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I think that it's easy in our day and age to be thinking about, you know, especially with so much social media and so many things are glamorous and big and just so, you know, overdone, that somehow taking out the garbage just doesn't mean anything anymore.
Right.
And so I love that we can say, oh, no, this is actually really important, or caring for your siblings, or helping to change a diaper, or, you know, I think that, especially, I know there's a lot of large families that are part of Teach Them Diligently. And, you know, it can be easy to feel guilty because you have to engage your older kids to help with the younger ones, but you are giving them a blessing.
Yeah.
Like, this is a huge blessing. And I can tell you that from hindsight, because all of my kids are so comfortable with babies and toddlers, like any age. There's no hesitation in how to care for them. And some of them have, one in particular, he married someone who knew nothing about children and about caring for them. And she has been a willing student, and he has been a loving teacher. And between the two of them, they haven't even been parents for 2 years yet. And they are just doing an amazing job. That she would ask questions and he would have answers, and it made her feel calm because he knew what he was doing. And this is the stuff of real life, you know, and as believers, we're called to have children and raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I'm really passionate about believing that in 10 to 15 years, all these kids that, you know, that are of these families who are attending TTD and who are homeschooling, that they're going to go out into the world, and there's going to be this shift in the culture. But it starts now at home, within the four walls of our homes, and in the simple things of taking the garbage out and doing the dishes and caring for what God has given us. He says if we're faithful in the little things, he'll make us ruler over many things. And so, you know, we can teach our kids that. It's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Well, I want to segue over to homeschooling here in just a second, but I have one more question that it's kind of off the wall, but it's something that God really amazed me with as I was raising my boys. raising my boys gave me a much better understanding of David. I was
Yes.
able to, like, it strengthened our marriage because the way I was a lot more patient with some of the things that they were doing because they're my kids, right?
Right.
But the Lord started saying, now, David, think of how this impacts him. And it was so insightful. And I just wanted to see, am I alone in that? Or did you find that with Darryl, it was also like, wow, so insightful as you saw in
Yes.
your boys what you saw bigger in your husband.
Absolutely. I don't think the little boy ever goes away in a
Yeah.
man. I mean, I see 70-year-old men and I can see the little boy in them, the
Exactly.
playfulness, some of those things. And yes, absolutely. I've actually had moms tell me that, yes, I understand my sons better, but I really understand my husband better after reading this book. But you're right. As you're raising your boys and you begin to see the connection between the two, it does really help you go, this is actually really fun.
I know. It was just so good for our marriage because I understood him better. And that's one of the things I've been so grateful to, that in God's plan, in giving me boys, it also gave me such a sweet, better understanding of my husband. And I'm
Yes,
just so very grateful for that.
absolutely.
So let's shift over, because most of the people who are listening homeschool, and boys can sometimes be a little difficult, a little stubborn. I used to tell mine from time to time that I felt like I was pushing an elephant up a hill. But what kind of insights do you share in your book about homeschooling boys?
Well, I think, several things, but one of the things that I would encourage specifically in the early years is not to be too quick to jump into a bunch of book work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Boys they can be 6 to 12 months or even more developmentally behind girls in kindergarten, first, second grade. They're very much more tactile, experimental, need to be running, jumping, digging, playing with bugs, all the things that they naturally love to do. And when we take that away from them and force them to do a bunch of book work, we're really harming them without realizing it. We think we're doing something good for them, but we're actually going against the nature that God has put in them. Now, again, this doesn't mean it's a free for all. It doesn't mean you don't ever do anything. But I think just taking a gentle and unhurried approach into the book aspect with the boys. I think that reading to them often is a great starting place. Reading stories that they're interested in, and letting them do things while you're reading to them, like let them play with Play-Doh, or, we'd give them something, a yoga ball to sit on, something where they can move. Some of them wanted to like hang upside down. I mean, from the couch, and it's like, that's fine. They would never be able to do that in a classroom.
Right.
But boys have this unique, well, girls do too, but I think it's more noticeable with boys because it's different from us as moms.
Mm-hmm.
They have this unique ability to know like when they're ready to learn something and when they're not. And instead of just like maybe crying or being a little bit emotional or trying anyway for the sake of the relationship like a girl might do, they will more than likely push back. And so that's when you have to kind of step back and ask yourself, is this something we need to, do a little longer, or should we just be done? And it's learning to do that dance with your son throughout the school years. But one thing that I did find was helpful once they were doing a little more book work was to give them breaks between subjects, to run, to jump on the trampoline. I got 15 minutes. I would set a timer and I said, we're going to do this, but here's the deal. And here's the boundary setting.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't come in when I call you, you're not going to have that privilege anymore. Yeah. And they didn't want to lose that. So they would come right away. And so, so just things like that. And then also for me, I felt like the boys did better with curriculum that had less words.
Mm-hmm.
So I might need to adapt and adjust and tweak my curriculum to something that's a little less wordy, because they get lost in the verbiage. So, and I talk about using few words in the book, just in my own relationship with the boys, but I think it also applies to homeschooling as well.
Oh, absolutely. And a couple of things as you were talking about the timers, I used a timer with almost everything, because I found that when I would leave my boys, okay, here's your assignment, and I would go off, that assignment would sprawl to fill however long I gave them and may not be completed at all. If there wasn't, like you noted, a boundary, there had to be a goal, something there to give them an end time that they knew they had to. It was almost like a race, like everything was a competition.
Right.
And I learned that the hard way, just by being so frustrated that stuff wasn't getting done. And then just that one simple thing ushered in so much more peace into our homeschool, because now there was an objective, there was a time limit, it was, put in a box for them. There was something there for a boundary, and it made our days run so much more smoothly.
Right. So what you did was you turned it into a mission.
Yeah.
As soon as you set that timer, all of a sudden you established a mission. We need to get this done before this timer goes off. And I don't know about you, but my girls probably would have cried if I did that.
There's no need for that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, you're exactly right. I love that. It's so true. And it just sometimes just these little things. And there's a lot of practical tips in my book. One mom described it as the most practical and instantly implementable resource she's ever read on boys.
Wow.
And I even had people at the conference who they were in my workshop, or they'd read a little bit of my book that evening or whatever. They implemented it that morning. They came back to my booth and they're like, "You're not going to believe this, but I tried it and it worked."
Go figure.
It was great. It was great.
That's awesome.
So yes, I love to hear that.
Oh my goodness, that is such high praise. And so it has to be so encouraging for you. I love your focus in the book on moms remaining teachable, moms, kind of keeping their heart and head open, allowing the Lord to teach them and grow them. We kind of talked about this at the very beginning. God grew me so much. I'm sure he grew you so much through raising boys. But why do you put such an emphasis on that for moms?
I think because my own experience raising boys is, I think that we sometimes have expectations that we're never going to be embarrassed by our boys, right? And so if we change our expectations and we're like, you know what, because I'm going to let him be who God made him to be, there's going to be an occasional event where he might be misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that happened to me one time in church. And I tell the story in the book that our youngest was kind of extra wiggly. We kept our kids in church with us, and he was a little extra wiggly, but I didn't think he was that bad. And I turned around and this woman was just in my face, like just angry with me, because she said, "You need to discipline him more." And she was very mean about it. And I felt like I had been hit by a truck. I don't even know how I responded to her. I wasn't mad or angry or anything. I was mostly hurt. But on the drive home, I just remember praying about it, because it was just such a heavy thing to me. And it was like the Lord just reminded me, look, Durenda, is there any shred of truth in what she said to me? And so this can be easy. It can be easy as mama bears to just constantly defend our sons, even when maybe they are actually out of line. And so I learned in that situation, and I didn't do that every time. That was like one of those times that stands out to me. That was like, that was a good thing to remember to do. But what I ended up doing was realizing that, you know what, I think I actually have been spoiling him just a little bit too much, because he's the youngest, and letting him get by. And if there was nothing more than that I took away from it, that was a gold nugget for me. That was a blessing from the Lord, not to continue to keep the standards, even with the littles, which you know how it is when the further you get down the line, the more tired you are, and the more you're like, this is not that big of a deal.
Well, and all the others are babying him too, which just compounds.
Exactly. So it was just it turned into a sweet, comforting, kind reminder, because it was filtered through the Lord. Right. And so I think that this is something that we as moms have to be willing to do. And it takes humility, and it takes teachableness. And sometimes it means we're going to be a little bit embarrassed, and that's okay, because God is doing not only a work in our sons, but he's doing a work in us too. He's sanctifying us, and we want to cooperate with that.
Oh, exactly. And you have to keep your mission in view as a mom. Ultimately, my goal is to raise my kids so that they love God, love people, and they're ready to walk through whatever door God opens for them in the days ahead. And along the way, they stumble and fall just like I do. Right. And sometimes they do it very publicly, and God uses the ramifications of those stumblings to make them the men or ladies that he's called them to be. And have always had to allow God to work in their life too. And
Absolutely.
that's not easy as a mom either, a lot of times.
No, it isn't. And I think that the thing we have to remember is that these kids are not our project.
Yeah.
They are God's creation, and
Mm.
he who has started a good work in them will be faithful to complete it. And I regularly remind him of that. But because, even as our kids are adults, they get more complicated, and,
Yes.
it actually doesn't get easier. I mean, it does in some ways, the physical part of it, the demanding part, but the emotional and mental and spiritual part of it gets more and more complex.
It's intense. Yeah.
Yeah. So to start out being teachable, start out recognizing that it's God at work, like you said, in the hearts of our kids, and it's his work that he is doing. They belong to him. Ultimately, we get to be part of that. And this is where I often pray, Lord, help me to see what part I play in it.
Yeah.
But other than that, help me to stay in my lane and just let you do what it is you're doing in the hearts of my kids.
Yeah, that's so good. Such a great reminder. Durenda, we are running out of time, but I want you to tell everyone, where can they find you? How can they get your book? You have more than just this one. I know that you have at least 3 that I've seen and read. So tell us about your other books, where we can find you, where we can connect with you.
Okay, well, the other books are The Unhurried Homeschooler, and also a simple, mercifully short book on homeschooling. And then The 4-Hour School Day, How You and Your Kids Can Thrive in the Homeschool Life. Then I have a devotional, Unhurried Grace for a Mom's Heart. And then this last one, Raising Boys to Men. And all 4 of those books can be found on Amazon, and you can find the audiobooks for the Unhurried Homeschooler and the Boy book on my website exclusively. So, which is durendawilson.com. And then I also have a podcast, the Durenda Wilson Podcast.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure that we link all of those in the show notes to make it really easy. But Durenda, as always, this has been a joy. I have loved talking to you about boys, and I am confident that it's been a real encouragement. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Well, thank you. And to everyone else, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We tell you every week that your Great Commission starts right there at home. Your home is your Jerusalem. And with our boys, we have such an opportunity to shepherd their hearts, to give them a foundation for their faith, and then to prepare them to launch out to be world changers for the kingdom. And that is a great privilege that we have. So I hope that you will pick up Durenda's book. You are going to find a lot of great wisdom in there, some clearly very easy to apply, get instant results, instant gratification like we all want right there from it. So go to the show notes. We've got all the links there, or go to durendawilson.com and you can find all of her resources there as well. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.